Welcome. Let's begin with NCERT Class 12th Economics, the second part that talks about macroeconomics. In the first part of our series, we talked about and focused only on the microeconomic concept. So this chapter would be a foundation about what is macroeconomics and understanding the intricacies of a macroeconomy. Macroeconomy, as the name suggests, macro means wide. So we are trying to understand a aggregate aspect, a much more broader aspect as compared to a microeconomics. Under microeconomics, our focus is the demand, the supply, the consumer, the producer. So that's the only vision that we have. But let me expand the vision, and we are moving towards what? We are moving towards the price rise in one country is affecting the price rise or the inflation in other nations. The employment scenario in one country is affecting the inflation scenario or the employment scenario in another country. Similarly, within the country, we say the employment scenario rises and goes down at the same pace across the country. So we have a much broader picture as compared to a minor picture that is understood in a microeconomics. So this macroeconomics is an aggregate or a holistic view. Now this diagram is a very good example to help you understand the very fundamental of macroeconomics. So if I explain you this diagram, I might say there are three dark circles that are there, then there is something that is matching to the background. But you would tell me, why are you explaining it in such an elaborate fashion? It's as simple as that. There is a white triangle between three black circles, and that's actually the case. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to explain this triangle by means of these circles. That means all the individual players which are coming from the microeconomics are important to understand this macroeconomic feature or this aggregate feature. So average of all the individual parameters taken together can be explained as a macroeconomic condition. If the output in, let's say, the food grain increases, what would happen? Definitely the industries would do better. You would have more industrial production that would come up. So what are the basic parameters that we understand under macroeconomics? We talk about employment, we talk about poverty, we talk about inflation, national income, national production, national output that we say, and global economics. So that's the vision under macroeconomics. A highly interesting branch of the economics is macroeconomics. Now when we understand how does it actually works, the inflation or the price rise can affect the other parameters. Similarly, if there is a declining production, declining employment, it would affect the national economy on a holistic basis. And again, as we said, there are interdependence that is seen from the macroeconomic parameter and from the various economic parameters as well. So we classify economy running under three divisions. You have agriculture, you have industry, and you have service sector. Now, this agriculture produce would go to the industries for, let's say, agro-based industry, also as a raw material for many industries, and the production for industries would ultimately be marketed through or supplied through, management should be taken care through the service sector. So all these three sectors are not independent in existence. A sector which is performing good would automatically thrust another sector, and a sector which is not performing good would automatically bring that problems to the next sector. So economy, the working of the economy is a very aggregate picture or a sum of all these interdependent activities that are running into the system. Understanding the key difference between the microeconomics and the macroeconomics. Under microeconomics, we choose individual players which are considered as decision makers. So you have economic decisions taken by economic agents, and these are understanding the nature of the problem. So you have the demand, the supply, the production that's taken into account, the producers, the consumers at a very minor level. So that's what is a microeconomics. Macroeconomics is a phenomenal thing which affects the economy as a whole, brings in picture like inflation, price rise, deflation, price drop. You have employment scenario, which are either mentioned or not mentioned into the system. So those are some of the basic aspects that we understand. Now Adam Smith was one of the leaders, or we could say founding fathers of economics, and during his time modern economics was mentioned as political economy. That's further interesting. Now what he suggested was that buyers and sellers in each of the market take their own decision following their own self-interest, and what ultimately happens is economists will not need to think about the wealth or about, let's say, the welfare of the country on a whole. So that was the picture that was given by Adam Smith. The book he wrote was very, very important, an inquiry into the nature and the cause of the wealth of nations. So basically called as Wealth of Nations. That's a popular name by for the book written by Adam Smith. And this comprehensive book focuses on numerous aspects. Now, some of the things that are brought into picture are markets did not or could not exist. That's the first thing that I can say. The second thing is I can say that markets existed, but somehow they failed to produce a kind of equilibrium that was required for the demand and the supply curve. So the equilibrium for the demand and the supply curve was not matched. Similarly, you had the society which decided to work around some important goals unselfishly. That could be in the form of education, health facilities, for which a aggregate effort is required. And this idea of aggregate effort came up with the theory of Keynes, who later on talked about and focused on the macroeconomic concept. So all the budgetary policing, the concept of interest, wage, employment, output have been discussed and have been deep rooted under macroeconomics. Under macroeconomics, we say who are the decision makers and what are they trying to do. So when I say what are they trying to do, it's very, very simple. Basically, macroeconomics is beyond the economic objectives. So you are trying to deploy all the economic resources for the public welfare or the welfare of the country, we can say. So that's what we are trying to do, the welfare of the nation. As simple as that. And all the economic resources are deployed for this purpose. Now, who are the decision makers? Under macroeconomic policy, you have the statutory bodies that come into play. So RBI, as in the case of India, the Reserve Bank of India, the SEBI, and many such institutions come into play. They would have certain goals that are defined for the public welfare, laid down by the law in the constitution. Then these goals are not for an individual to progress, but for the welfare of the entirety or the entirety of the nation, we could say. So that's the major idea under this. Now, how does this macroeconomics evolve? A very important question. So far, we were very comfortable with the classical traditional economics. And what was it? This classical traditional economics talked about that there are ample of factories that are there, ample of employment opportunities coming in, and each of these factories are working on their full capacity. They cannot go beyond that. So everyone is well placed in their surrounding. However, there was the period of Great Depression, and this Great Depression was the period when Keynes thought about and wrote the book The General Theory on Employment, Interest and Money, which was a result of examining the implications of the Great Depression. What happened during the Great Depression was you had countries of Europe and North America where employment significantly basically declined. This decline in the employment in the countries of Europe and North America affected, and that basically led to the demand for the goods. Now, demand for the goods in the market was low, and this slum that was seen in these areas were slowly and gradually reflected across the world. So, within a period of, let's say, 4 years in America itself, the unemployment increased from 3% to 25%. The aggregate output declined by 33%. With that scenario, this scenario was seen not only in the parts of America, but slowly and gradually transmitting across the globe. This led Keynes to think about there has to be an interdependence between the various sectors, between the economies of the various countries, and this thought itself was the foundation stone for the macroeconomics, because one economic sector was affecting the another economic sector. There was prosperity in one leading to prosperity in other, but here what happened was a significant decline in the employment scenario, a significant decline in the output, which affected the other countries of the world as well. Now Keynes, in his theory, basically tried to bring about not only just the picture of employment, the picture of inflation, but also he worked as a foreign currency speculator, and that was another interesting thing that was one of the major focuses of Keynes. Coming on to the content for our chapters here, our focus would be on the capitalistic economy. So how does economy works in a capitalist nation? Capitalist nation have productions which are carried by enterprises. Now these capital enterprises can have one or many entrepreneurs. Let's say there are 2 and 3 entrepreneurs. So first is the entrepreneur that is there. Now this entrepreneur would require certain things in order to work around the production. What would be it? It would be, first he would require a land where he could establish an industry or a plant or a office or whatever it is. The next is the labor that is there. So someone who should work for him. Capital is definitely there, and then natural resources, those could be partly consumable or partly fixed. So some of the resources that you say would be fixed. For example, you are buying office, so that office land is fixed. But on the other hand, you are buying equipments which require changes off and on. You are buying software that require changes off and on. Similarly, on a factory floor, you have raw material that's coming regularly. So that's partly consumable. So you have the resources that could be fragmented as partly fixed or partly consumable. Those are the fixed assets and the consumable assets. Now, once you have all this, what would happen? The entrepreneur would generate revenue. Out of this revenue, he would pay certain things. To the labor, he would pay the wages. For the land, he would pay the rent. Then he would also, if he is taking the capital, he would pay the interest to the capital. That might be on a loan or something. After paying all this, what he is left with is the profit that he has earned over the time. This profit would go as investment. If it's going as investment further into the business, to increase the business, to enhance the business, to bring in new machinery, to bring up a new plant, this is what is known as an investment expenditure. And this expenditure is essentially growing the capitalist or his capitalistic business. Now, what does a capitalist economy signify? Capitalist economy signifies there is a private ownership for the means of production that is there. With this private ownership, the production takes place for selling the output to the market. So first of all, there is private role players that are there. Then you are selling the output to the market. The sale and the purchase of the labor service that is there is at a price which is known as wage rate. Then you have the labor that is sold and purchased against the wages, and this is referred to as the wage labor. Most of the countries of America, Europe are working on a capitalist society or a capitalistic economy basis. However, you might have tribal groups where people work on an ownership basis or on a kind of community belongingness. So there you cannot have a capitalist model that exists. Similarly, if there is underdeveloped economy where people are working only for subsistence to fulfill their own requirements, you cannot have a kind of a capitalistic economy that could exist in this region. So what are the sectors under economics that we primarily focus on? First is the state, which is in common language called as government. So what does the state or the government does? It maintains the rules, imposes the taxes, helps in running the schools, the basic amenities, the basic infrastructural facilities that are there. Then you have the production unit or the firm. This production unit or the firm is one where the entrepreneur hires the laborers, provides them wages and generates output. He earns revenue out of it, a part of which is capped as profit. Similarly, you have household sectors. Household sectors are individuals who are taking part in this economic cycle. So you have some of those who are working in the government department earning the salaries, and another who are basically leasing out the land or the capital that they have. They are lending out the capital that they have. And finally, you have an external trade that takes place, and that trade is besides the country borders. So if it is going from the country to outside, we say it's export. If it is coming within the country and we are buying from the world, we say it's the import. So im comes from the word in, and that's how you can remember it. So import is basically coming in and export is exit, so it's going out of the country. So going out of the country is export, buying from the world is import. So selling to the world and buying to the world is as simple as what you can remember as, and that's external trade. So these are the four important aspects of the sectors of economy that we would be focusing on. As we would move through our lectures, we would be considering the intricacies of the macroeconomics, a very interesting topic indeed. So stay tuned, do subscribe, have a wonderful day.